The sun was shining brightly as the day unfolded at a quiet suburban park. The air was filled with the sweet fragrance of blooming flowers and the soft rustle of leaves in the light breeze. It was the perfect setting for a perfect day, the wedding day of Olivia and James. Their families and friends gathered to celebrate their union, the culmination of years of love, laughter, and shared dreams. The ceremony was small but elegant, a simple affair that reflected the couple's values. The bride, Olivia, looked radiant in her white gown, her smile lighting up the entire venue. James, standing beside her, couldn't hide his pride and excitement. He was beaming, his eyes never leaving Olivia as they exchanged vows. They had known this moment was coming, but it still felt surreal. For Olivia and James, this wasn't just a celebration of love. It was the moment they had worked hard to reach. It was a testament to their resilience as a couple, navigating the ups and downs of life together and finally being able to commit to one another in front of their loved ones. Their families surrounded them, and the guests smiled, witnessing the profound connection the couple shared. But not everyone in attendance was pleased with their happiness. Across the street, just beyond the lush greenery and colorful decorations, there stood a house with the curtains drawn. Mr. Walker, the neighbor, watched the wedding from his front porch, his expression sour. Mr. Walker had been living in this neighborhood for decades. He prided himself on his reputation, his wealth, and his status in the community. His opinion mattered to him, and he made sure everyone knew it. However, his views were rooted in outdated beliefs, and his intolerance toward change had shaped his narrow worldview. He watched Olivia and James with a mixture of disdain and irritation. It wasn't their love that bothered him. It was the fact that Olivia, a black woman, had married a white man. In Mr. Walker's eyes, their union was a violation of the order he had come to expect in his neighborhood, a neighborhood he believed should reflect his values he had stubbornly clung to for years. As he sat there, the irritation built. He couldn't stand seeing them happy, seeing them so open and joyful while his narrow views festered in the shadows. The cheers from the wedding guests only seemed to increase his frustration. His eyes narrowed as he watched Olivia and James, the love they shared too pure, too visible for his comfort. He couldn't ignore the growing resentment. The wedding ceremony continued without interruption, and the guests continued to celebrate the couple's happiness. But little did they know, a storm was brewing, a storm of prejudice fueled by an old man's misguided beliefs. And as the vows were exchanged and the laughter echoed through the park, Mr. Walker made a decision. He would not stand for this celebration any longer. He couldn't sit idly by and watch what he saw as a disruption to the community he believed he had the power to control. The first step he took would change everything. As the wedding ceremony continued, Olivia and James exchanged vows, their voices steady with the excitement and joy of the moment. The guests were captured in the beauty of the occasion, some wiping away tears of happiness, others exchanging light-hearted jokes. It was a perfect scene of celebration, one that embodied the love and warmth shared between the couple. But for Mr. Walker, standing silently across the street, the scene unfolding in the park was unbearable. His frustration had built to a boiling point. The joyous sounds of laughter, the music, the unity, everything about this day seemed to defy what he had long considered to be acceptable. He couldn't stand seeing Olivia and James happy, knowing that it made a mockery of what he believed was the right way of life. Unable to contain himself any longer, he stormed into his house, slamming the door behind him. His thoughts raced with anger, his hands shaking as he reached for his phone. He dialed the local police station, his voice dripping with contempt as he spoke to the dispatcher. "There's a wedding happening here," he said, his words harsh. "It's too loud, too disruptive. The people there don't belong in this neighborhood. I need you to come and deal with this." It's getting out of hand. There's a black woman marrying a white man, and it's causing all kinds of problems." The dispatcher, taken aback by the sharpness of his tone, hesitated but promised to send an officer to investigate the complaint. Mr. Walker, however, wasn't satisfied with just a call to the police. He stood by his window, glaring at the wedding through the curtains, as though he believed his mere presence could force the festivities to stop. His chest tightened with indignation as he waited for the authorities to arrive. Meanwhile, the celebration continued unabated. Olivia and James had just exchanged their first kiss as a married couple when the sound of sirens broke through the air, distantly at first, but growing louder with each passing second. The couple, still lost in the magic of the moment, barely noticed, but the guests did. The joy in the air shifted into confusion as the sirens grew closer, their wail now unmistakable. The first officer to arrive, Officer Scott, was a middle-aged man with a gruff demeanor, unfamiliar with the community and its inhabitants. He had been sent on a routine call, just another noise complaint, he assumed. When he arrived and saw the wedding in full swing, he didn't immediately understand the underlying tension. There were no loud noises, no fights, nothing that warranted police intervention. The guests were all enjoying themselves, and the ceremony was beautifully serene. But when Mr. Walker approached the officer, he wasted no time in planting the seeds of doubt. "This wedding shouldn't be happening here," Mr. Walker insisted, his voice quivering with frustration. "You need to stop this. I've been living here for years, and I can't stand to see something like this going on. It's disrespectful to the people who've lived here for generations." Officer Scott glanced back at the wedding, observing the peaceful scene in contrast to Mr. Walker's aggression. He wasn't sure what exactly was bothering the older man, but it was clear that his complaints went beyond just noise. "This is a private event, sir," Officer Scott replied, trying to de-escalate the situation. "Everything seems to be in order. I don't see any reason for us to intervene." But Mr. Walker, sensing that the officer wasn't taking his complaints seriously, became more insistent. "It's not just noise. It's the people they're inviting. They don't belong here. This neighborhood was built for people like us. We can't just let anyone move in and make this their home." The officer shifted uncomfortably. He had been a police officer for years, but something about Mr. Walker's words seemed off, yet he wasn't sure how to handle it. He had been trained to diffuse tensions, but this situation felt more like a confrontation than a simple complaint. "Sir, I understand you're upset," Officer Scott said cautiously, "but there's nothing illegal going on here. This is a wedding. People are free to marry whomever they choose." Mr. Walker's face reddened with fury, his fists clenched at his sides. He had expected more from the police, a reaction that aligned with his own prejudices, but instead, the officer stood his ground, his tone steady and professional. The situation was becoming tense, and as the officer began to walk away, Mr. Walker's frustration boiled over. He wasn't ready to let it go, not yet. With a last, frustrated glance at the wedding, he mumbled something about the integrity of the neighborhood and stormed back to his home. The officer, realizing that he had successfully diffused the immediate tension, returned to his patrol car, but before leaving he turned back one final time to look at the wedding. As the couple exchanged vows and their guests cheered, he couldn't help but feel that Mr. Walker's complaints weren't about noise at all. Something deeper, something uglier was motivating him. He sighed and drove off, leaving the wedding to continue peacefully. As the ceremony wrapped up and the couple was officially declared husband and wife, they had no idea that their day had been marked by more than just the beginning of a beautiful new chapter. The shadow of Mr. Walker's prejudice still hung over the neighborhood, but for now the couple's love and joy remained unshaken. The wedding reception continued in full swing, with guests dancing and enjoying the festivities. Olivia and James shared their first dance as a married couple, twirling under the string lights, their smiles lighting up the night. The warmth of the celebration surrounded them, and for a moment all was right in their world. Yet just beyond the glimmer of joy, the shadow of Mr. Walker's bitter attitude lingered, growing darker as the evening wore on. Inside his house, Mr. Walker fumed. The audacity of Olivia and James, the way they had so freely celebrated their union in a place he considered his own territory, gnawed at him. He couldn't stand how the neighborhood was changing, how people different from him were making their presence known, all while ignoring what he believed were the rules of the community. It was something he had never truly considered until today, but now it had become a matter of pride. He could no longer ignore the growing frustration bubbling inside him. He paced back and forth, muttering to himself, his hands shaking with anger. The thought of those people, those strangers, celebrating in a space he felt was only meant for people like him, was infuriating. His mind began to spiral as he convinced himself that something needed to be done. The police had already left, but he wasn't about to let this go so easily. In his mind, he envisioned walking back to the wedding, marching up to Olivia and James and declaring that their union didn't belong in his neighborhood. He imagined disrupting the entire reception, making everyone uncomfortable, demanding that they leave. He believed it was his right to reclaim the peace he thought was his to guard. But the rational side of him, the one that knew he couldn't act out without consequences, fought against the irrational urges building inside him. Still, the anger simmered. He knew something had to be done. His frustration, once just a simmering annoyance, was now something much more dangerous. As the night grew darker, he began making plans. But out of all of his actions, one thing became clear. Mr. Walker's hatred was consuming him, and the wedding that he had tried to destroy, the happiness he had tried to mar, would soon come to remind him just how deep-seated his prejudices truly ran. As the police officers stepped back, the atmosphere around Olivia and James was still tense. The wedding guests, who had been quietly observing the unfolding scene, now whispered among themselves. The air was thick with uncertainty. What would happen next? Mr. Walker, his face flushed with anger, turned back to the officers. His frustration was palpable. The moment he'd been waiting for, his chance to disrupt the wedding, hadn't gone according to plan. He had expected the police to side with him, but instead they had backed away, clearly uncomfortable with his blatant racial prejudice. For a moment it seemed like he might just leave. But his pride wouldn't let him. He couldn't stand the thought of walking away, defeated. The wedding, this beautiful, peaceful moment, was something he couldn't tolerate. "Enough is enough," Mr. Walker yelled. His voice was sharp and filled with venom. The wedding guests watched in stunned silence as the confrontation escalated. It wasn't just a matter of noise or inconvenience anymore. It was about dignity, respect, and the right to love who you choose. Olivia and James had been standing tall, but now they felt a renewed sense of power in the face of Mr. Walker's racist fury. As the moment stretched, the officer who had been hesitant earlier stepped forward. "Mr. Walker," he said, his tone finally firm, "I'm asking you to leave. You've caused enough disruption today. There's no reason for this to continue." Mr. Walker's face turned beet red with anger, his fists clenched at his sides. But despite his desire to continue, something in the officer's voice broke through. His eyes darted around the scene, and for the first time he recognized the discomfort of the guests, the solidarity that was quietly growing among them. He wasn't going to win this fight. "You can't do this!" Mr. Walker shouted, his voice cracking with rage. "You're going to regret this!" The officer nodded, signaling for Mr. Walker to leave. "Sir, this is your final warning. With a look of disgust, Mr. Walker turned on his heel and stomped off, muttering curses under his breath. His departure was swift, but it left a lingering sense of victory in the air. As soon as Mr. Walker was out of sight, the wedding guests let out a collective sigh of relief. The tension in the air seemed to dissipate, and the music, which had been momentarily paused, resumed in full force. People resumed dancing, chatting, and celebrating, their spirits lifted once more. Olivia and James, though exhausted from the emotional turmoil, smiled at one another. They had made it through a difficult situation, and they had done so together. Their love had triumphed over hate, and that was something worth celebrating. The rest of the evening passed without incident. The wedding, though briefly marred by Mr. Walker's actions, had been a triumph, a celebration not just of their love, but of their strength in the face of adversity. And in that moment they knew that nothing would ever break their bond, not even the ugliest forces of prejudice. As the evening wound down, Olivia and James finally had a moment to themselves. The music had softened, the last of the guests were finishing their desserts, and the once energetic buzz of conversation had faded into comfortable murmurs. The reception had been a success despite the interruption, and Olivia and James found solace in the fact that their wedding day had still been filled with love and joy, no matter what had been thrown at them. But for Olivia, something was missing. She stood with James at the edge of the dance floor, her gaze searching for Mr. Walker. It had been hours since the incident, and she had expected the ugliness to be behind them. But part of her still felt unsettled. The memory of his harsh words, his attempts to ruin the day, still lingered in the back of her mind. James squeezed her hand, sensing her discomfort. "We've made it through this. We're stronger than this," he said softly, his words a comforting reminder that they had won. Not just for themselves, Olivia nodded, offering him a faint smile. "You're right, we are stronger than this, but I can't help but feel like there's more to be done. People like him, people with hate in their hearts, they don't just go away. We need to keep fighting." James looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "You've always been strong, Olivia, and you're not alone in this fight. You have me, and you have all of us." He gestured to their friends and family who had gathered in support around them. This day, this wedding, is a testament to that. Olivia looked around at the people who had surrounded her with love. Their support meant everything to her, and she realized that this day, despite the darkness Mr. Walker had tried to bring, was a celebration of love, unity, and strength. The fight wasn't over, but today was a reminder that love always prevails. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Olivia and James exchanged a curious glance, wondering who it could be at this late hour. One of the guests answered, and to their surprise, a police officer entered the room, his demeanor professional but serious. "Olivia and James Davis?" the officer asked. "Yes, that's us," Olivia replied, her heart racing slightly. She had no idea what this visit was about. Had Mr. Walker filed a complaint? Was there more fallout from the earlier confrontation? The officer nodded. "I just wanted to come by and personally apologize on behalf of the department," he said. "I know you were treated unfairly earlier. The behavior of Mr. Walker was completely out of line, and it won't be tolerated. We've already filed a report on his actions, and I want to assure you that there will be consequences." Olivia and James were stunned. They hadn't expected this. The apology wasn't just from the officer, it was from the whole police department. Their actions had been seen, acknowledged, and they were being held accountable for the treatment Olivia and James had received. "We also want to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again," the officer continued. "We've spoken to Mr. Walker, and he's been informed that any further harassment or disruption of public events will result in legal action. You shouldn't have had to deal with any of this, but please know that we are doing everything we can to make sure it doesn't happen again." Olivia took a deep breath, her emotions mixed. She had been waiting for an apology like this, but hearing it made her realize how deep the impact of Mr. Walker's actions had been. To know that the police had not only recognized the wrongdoing but were taking steps to prevent future occurrences was a relief. It gave her hope that things were changing, that people were beginning to take a stand against injustice. "Thank you," Olivia said softly, her voice steady. "That means a lot to us." The officer nodded and left, leaving the newlyweds to reflect on what had just happened. They realized that while one man's hate had tried to overshadow their day, they had managed to turn the situation around. The apology from the police department was a powerful reminder that change could happen, that justice was possible, and that love always wins. The night ended as it had started, surrounded by love and support. Olivia and James held each other close, knowing that they had triumphed not just over Mr. Walker's racism, but over the bigger fight for equality and respect. In the end, it wasn't just a wedding they had celebrated. It was the triumph of love over hate, of standing together, and of knowing that no matter the obstacles, love would always find a way.